Election of 1828, Jackson won. Who was the vice president?
Calhoun.
Yeah, Calhoun is vice president. And yeah, Calhoun thought Jackson will protect plantation owners. Boy, did he not understand Jackson. Actually, thought Jackson was an idiot. He really underestimated Jackson. Jackson was no dummy. Jackson was a very intelligent man. With a slight temper. Just a slight little temper. And it was a sweep for Jackson. That kind of hurt. Well, you can see it right here. This is the big change. Look at the number of people who voted in the 1824 election. Now look at 1828. Wow, it's pretty good. That's amazing. More and more people are voting. The term is, in fact, the term I want you to write down is the franchise. The franchise was increased. So write down the franchise. Which question?
So on the map, essentially, so 1, 4, and 5 of those 3 separate states, and they're all part of that.
No, what they are is the electoral votes. And back then, what happened is, like in Illinois, 2 electors voted for Jackson and one voted for Clint Johnson. Yeah, that's what it means.
How come that doesn't happen anymore?
Yeah.
Technically, they can, but almost every state has a law that says that the party will pick the electors. And so, for example, in 2012, the Democratic Party picked supporters of Obama, so you know they vote for Obama. And the Republican Party picked supporters of Romney, so you know they vote for Romney. But technically, they could do it if they wanted to. But by state law, we vote. Like you vote for Obama, you pick Obama supporters or Romney supporters. In 2016, it'll be Clinton supporters, and I have no idea what the Republican Party. Got her done?
That's a premature.
All right,
It's not a-
That's that fancy.
Hey, we're just watching Eight Men Out. We'll talk about it again. Yeah. It's a good movie. We couldn't do our cult stuff and special topics. I couldn't start a cult.
I heard that you guys were gonna make the freshmen die or something.
No! We're gonna make the freshmen. We're gonna give the freshmen new names and have them give all their money. That's what cults do.
Okay. You like remember?
Wait, did you like talk to about administration for it?
Very well.
It's called a joke.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah, we're joking.
I've been in your.
No, what happened is they're doing the college pre-application for college, and so we couldn't get in computer labs to do a presentation. No, we do about how cults and history and stuff. It's really good topic. No, the administrator. No. But the joke is about starting our own cult. All right, so the franchise. What the franchise is do you know what a franchise is in business?
Chains.
You ever hear like McDonald's is the best example of a franchise?
Is it like when they're owned by people that's part of the corporation?
Yeah, essentially people in Helena actually they paid McDonald's to buy a franchise, allowing them to open up a store in Helena. It's owned by private individuals, but part of the contract to buy it from McDonald's, they must do, meet McDonald's standards for food safety, cleanliness, all those kind of things. Use McDonald's food, that kind of thing. So technically, McDonald's sold to someone else. They get the profits, but then they have to pay McDonald's for all the material. And so it's like you buy a little piece of the company. You're still independent, but you own part of the company. Subway's a franchise. I don't think.
Isn't Little Caesars a franchise?
Yeah, Little Caesars, I know it's a franchise, yeah. I don't think, what's the other sandwich place? The one that sheets their workers. Quiznos is a franchise. Jimmy John's that cheats their workers.
How do they cheat their workers?
They make them work off the clock. Make them work without getting paid. Jimmy John, yeah, it's a big deal. It's a big deal. And they also make all the workers at Jimmy John sign a contract so they won't work for another fast food restaurant. They just say clock off, we got to do some more work.
I like it.
So it's called wage shift.
I found to see more.
Jimmy John's, I think, is owned by the company.
See so many Jimmy John drivers pulled over because they time them on how long it takes to do delivery. So you see a lot of people pulled over.
Jimmy John's, they're pretty tough, but it's pretty tough place to work. And so, but the point is, the franchise is like the vote. When people vote, it's like you're taking a little ownership of the country. You're still independent because you pick who you vote for, but you get an ownership. And that's why I love the term the franchise. So what's happening here is the franchise has increased. More people feel ownership. And by the way, it's true. If you vote, you are taking ownership for the good things and the bad things. And what's sad is taking advantage of, or just remarking about what's happening more and more today. In this midterm election, I mean, incredibly low voter turnout. Obviously, a lot of Americans, for whatever the reason is, aren't voting. And so they're letting somebody else own the country for them. Somebody else who owns the country who probably doesn't care a lick about them. No, probably. They don't care anything about them. It's actually really frightening. If you get more and more people that simply say, you know, whatever, doesn't matter, and you let other people decide for them, the republic dies. That's called the death spiral of a republic. This is actually a really, really scary thing. Really scary. And so a lot of people fought very hard to get these numbers up. And now we have people saying, nah, it doesn't matter, whatever. Wow, does it matter? Because governments have incredible impact on people's lives. It frightens me, it scares me. It's the kind of thing that makes me worry about the future. What's that? And so, what we're coming up to is a concept that Americans fought really hard for. Jacksonian democracy, which is in reality what democracy came to be in America. Now this is Jackson kicking out the mongrel dogs that are attacking him. All the opponents of the democracy, and he's whipping them away. Yeah.
Is there a little person riding that dog? Is there a little person riding that dog?
It's supposed to be like a little devil.
Oh.
I love the little person.
But when they do actually attack, they cower in fear because Jackson represents the people. I know. It's kind of a funny cartoon, but Jackson came to represent and stand for American democracy. He was the symbol of it. And I'm going to skip forward to this. It's kind of hard to tell for these maps because it has weird rules. But before, in 1800, most states were, this is in green, it's property requirements. You had to have property. White men had to have property to vote. By 1830, only a couple states required that. Some states, like New York and Vermont, all white men could vote. These states, anybody paid taxes. So you didn't have that property as long as you paid taxes. Okay, there's still restrictions, but the point is more people got the franchise. More people in the United States had the expectation that I matter and my vote matters. Who I want matters. Before, most people didn't matter. Hey, you're not important. You matter. By the way, that's also makes the people not voting scary. They're actually saying, hey, you know what? I don't want to matter. So, look at the turnout. Of people of voting age, only 27% could vote. By 1860, 81% voted. We would know what to do if 81% voted.
I don't even voted this time for Sunday.
Montana had a record low in the midterm. Montana usually has really high voting numbers, but it's about 54% of eligible voters.
What's usual?
About 60, low 60s on a midterm. In a presidential election, it goes up. That's part of the reason why, too, people think the country's going bad. The Democrats were seen as a majority. Midterm elections usually go against the party in power. You could have a totally, I would not be surprised. This election, Republicans did really well. In 2016, my guess is the Democrats are going to do really, really well. It's just going to kind of go up and down. Midterm Republicans, presidential Democrats. We have a flawed system.
So you basically get 2 years of working and then it's just tough.
Yeah, more gridlock. But, and nationwide it was probably about 35%.
Well,
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, Montana, a lot of people vote. And even in Montana, it was really low. I mean, just a few thousand voters in some of these elections would have totally turned around the election. I mean, these were relatively close. So it's a big deal. Okay, so all of it rested on this Jackson's just complete faith in the common man. That complete faith in the common man would be the symbol of democracy. Remember what I said about common man. It's not average, it's not an aristocratic birth. Everybody. And the first most important thing is a new definition of democracy. Democracy came to mean in the United States. In fact, when people say democracy, this is what they mean, that the people are sovereign. The people are sovereign. Do you remember what sovereign means? Power. The people have power. Ultimately, the people have power. And so they could argue that democracy is really what they meant in the Declaration of Independence. But the last one is democracy, the people have power, and how do they show that? Self-determination. The people will decide their government, who will make these big decisions for them, and if they don't like them, they'll kick them out. How the system will work, the people have self-determination. How they show that? By voting. By voting. And so, democracy equals sovereignty equals self-determination. That's what American democracy meant. I repeat, the United States is not a democracy in a true definition. But we came to mean as, in a republic, the people still have the power to choose, and we choose it by voting. Next. Why? Those awful, tiny elite. They distrusted a certain group that said, if we don't vote, this group would take power. The establishment, this elite, like those who had monopolies of business and power, those who got special privileges from government, like the bank and roads and tariffs, and all representing a new evil entity to the first democracy, the corporation. By the way, there's only one corporation in the United States. So this one corporation represented this evil little interest that if the people don't vote, they'll take power. The corporation is called the Bank of the United States, the bus. The bus. That became the symbol of everything Democrats favor. What's that? Two things that go together. This idea that the individual has power, and every individual, even the common man. The individual has power. The individual, I am important. And it doesn't matter how I'm born. It doesn't matter if by luck at birth my parents were rich or not. I have power. And when it comes to that then, oh, this is Jackson fighting off, see this monster? That's the special interest, that's the bank. Jackson's fighting them off. And who's he fighting them off for? Us. You feel safe? Hey, if anybody's going to fight for me, I wouldn't mind Jackson. He's the toughest man ever to live. Crazy, mean, some ways horrible, some ways great. Gotta love Andrew Jackson. So, what we come up with is this Jacksonian idea of the spoil system. Write down the spoil system, put a star by it, so don't forget to look at the spoil system. Because the spoil system, you ever heard the term, to the victor goes the spoils?
Yes.
Thank you. To the victor goes the spoils. And the spoils, it meant patronage. Okay, patronage is a term you're going to have to know. What patronage means are government jobs, the giving of government jobs. Back then, every single federal government job, okay, there weren't near as many today, but every single one, the president, at their whim, could have them fired and replaced with somebody else. And so patronage meant giving the job to people you want to give the job to. What Jackson said in his spoil system, the people want the democracy. What kind of people should I put in the government jobs? The people want democracy. I can now put people in government jobs. Really important jobs like the customs officers who collect the tariff at the post office. And what kind of people what kind of workers do the people want? People that support what? The democracy. So what Jackson is saying, I should fire most of the old workers and put in people who supported me because that's what the people want. The people voted me in office. The people have the power. They voted me in office. I better put my supporters in there. That is the spoil system. By the way, that's very logical. Yeah. If the people want Democrats, don't you want Democrats in office? If the people want Whigs, don't you want Whigs? Or the people want Tories, or the people want, I'm thinking of other parties around the world, the Social Democrats or the Christian Democrats. Now we're going to Germany. The liberals. The I Hate Andrew Jackson party. The Anti-Mason Party, the Prohibition Party, the Temperance Party. Don't you want them in charge? Now, the opponents are going to attack this bitterly, and I think you can guess why. But this is part of the democracy. If the people in power, we better get people to support the people in jobs. That's how it worked that way. Next, how they chose nominees changed. Before they had a caucus, and the caucus turned into a nominating convention to pick nominees. For president, before it was a very haphazard way. Okay, a caucus. Let me explain what a caucus is very quickly. A caucus is a tiny group of like-minded people. So like, for example, if they say a caucus of Republicans in Congress, that means only Republicans, a tiny little group of Republicans in Congress come together. And then caucus means they vote. If we say a caucus of Democrats or a caucus of Whigs. In Congress today, there's a caucus, there's a Tea Party caucus, there's a Progressive caucus, there's a Black Congressional Congress of blacks in Congress. There's also a basketball congress of all these guys who men and women who play basketball in the congressional gym come together and meet. Okay, that's more just for fun. But the point is, you get these like-minded people. What happened is a caucus of Republicans got together and chose the nominees. A tiny little group of elite. And what a convention is, you get people from all over the country. So Democrats or Whigs, or the first one to do it, the Anti-Mason Party, come together and they pick their nominee. Much more democratic. And it would be nominating conventions, how presidents would be chosen. From 1836, so this is a Jacksonian reform, the Democrats would choose their candidates that way until 1968, the Republicans till 1972. I think it's actually a really good system. Today we do it by a combination of voters choosing the nominees called primaries or party caucuses. I missed the conventions. All you need to know, yeah, Republicans at 72, Democrats at 68, and we'll get to that because that was a big deal. I don't know.
When did the Republicans start? When did the Republicans
The Republicans of today, say it again.
What was the first that they started?
The first group was the Anti-Mason Party. 1832 was the first one, but the Democrats started doing it in 1836. The Anti-Mason Party is exactly what it sounds like. They feared Freemasons. You know what a Freemason is? What are they?
Like weird religious, like go around.
Well, they don't think they're weird.
Like it's weird that you have to you have to be related to a Mason to be a Mason, and like then there's the Eastern Star and the Job's daughters and the Himalaya.
It's a very secret group that came together with no one knows exactly what they do. They have certain rituals because you only know if you're a member. And they have all kinds of requirements. Well, Masons were very popular. It started in medieval Europe. By the 1700s, they became really popular. 6 of our first 7 presidents were Masons. And then since it's a secret group, people by 1832, a lot of people believe there must be the secret cabal that's planning to take over our country. Masons. A cabal. A cabal is a group of individuals usually involved in a conspiracy. So they formed a party to stop the Masons. Andrew Jackson was a Mason. Yes. Okay. Shh. And the Masons, and so the thing about it was that they believed this. It show you that, well, Americans are always like that. Americans are very willing to believe conspiracy, that there's some kind of plot. Americans are really willing to believe that. It's kind of funny. But convention, more democratic. Next. So we come right down to it. What they wanted was ultimately the majority rule. Not real democracy, where the majority decides everything, but the majority are ultimately powerful. And so what Jackson thought is we have this group of common men voting, they'll always vote for what's best for society. And who made up this group? Oh, this is kind of a Jacksonian image then. There is Jackson standing on his carriage talking to a group of people. You see them all there. So like this public meeting coming together. It goes back a little bit to the town meetings of New England. Coming together, listen, did this happen? Nah, not really, but that was their vision of it. Their vision of Jackson representing a cross-section of everybody. And these are the groups. Plantation owners at first. And plantation owners really thought Jackson was just Lying about his belief in the common man. They thought this would protect their plantations. These are the people who joined the coalition. Or these are the first Democrats of these groups. These were the first Democrats. The party was called the Democracy at first. Plantation owners at first. Calhoun became vice president for that reason, then left when he realized that Jackson really wasn't going to support plantation owners. Small independent farmers. Remember yeomen? Westerners. Immigrants. All these immigrants, especially these new Catholic immigrants. Also, laborers, common workers. Skilled workers in this era were called mechanics. They're the ones who worked on the machine tools. Also, wage workers. And right down with wage workers, labor unions. Labor unions were supported by the Democrats. There's a wing of them called the local Focos. The local Focos. And those who were worried that with the Second Great Awakening, religion was going to take over the government. They were terrified of this. So they wanted to continue this iron separation of church and state. That's probably the reason why so many Catholics became Democrats, because a lot of the Second Great Awakening was Protestant. For example, Jackson was under a lot of pressure. One of the biggest issues of the day that everyone just kind of forgot was that Jackson refused to change the post office's procedure of delivering mail on Sundays. Of course they're going to deliver mail on Sundays. There's no religious test for government. We're not going to stop the government because it's a religious holiday. Yes, Jackson was religious, but he wanted this separation. And so immediately, because he would not do that, he's obviously a godless heathen.
Catholics anymore, though. Catholics anymore, though. Republicans. If you're like true Catholic, you're Republican.
That's because
Catholics would be overwhelmingly Democratic. Catholics still slightly vote majority Democratic today in presidential elections.
Right, but I mean.
But not then, because there was such an anti-Catholic bias. And the nativists were mostly Whigs. The anti-Jackson were mostly elites. The elites. Capitalists, soon-to-be plantation owners. And this is supposed to show Jackson as this bloodthirsty villain hanging John Quincy Adams. But soon they would adopt. See, the idea of the Andrew Jackson party, it doesn't roll off the tongue. And eventually Jackson will die. And so they took the name of the opposition party in Britain. They called themselves the Whigs. Remember, the Patriots were called the Whigs too during the Revolutionary War. And the Whigs really were a hodgepodge of people. But their main fear, why they hated Jackson, were these reasons. That they hated democracy. They called democracy king numbers or king mob. King numbers. Why numbers? Whoever got the most votes. You count them up. So instead of good, sound policy, they would claim, it's now just whoever has majority, and you can sway the mob. And who sways them? Jackson became a tyrant, or simply called King Andrew. Jackson is a tyrant who powers by swaying the mob. Next, Jackson was seen as a radical, his pro-union, anti-corporate approach, and they called Jackson a demagogue. Does anybody know what a demagogue means? Great word. Well, demagogue, you're taking the actual
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't read it.
demagogue. Yeah, not you're thinking demigod. Demagogue is somebody who plays upon people's fears. And they said Jackson was scaring people by saying this bank was going to take over your life. And yeah, by the way, that's what politicians do. Now today, that's all they do is play on people's fears. Sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. Did you see any television ads? What do they do? My opponent will destroy the world. You know, most of them say that they're trying to play on people's fears. We didn't get as much because, once again, we live in Montana. Next, they hated the spoils system. You're going to put a bunch of uneducated yahoos in government. They called it the cult of mediocrity. You're going to put people who aren't qualified. By the way, this is a very common elite thing to this very day. They didn't go to an Ivy League school, so they can't possibly understand the way the society works. When you look at government today, you know, Obama has a little bit of a lead in him, and he is surrounded by Ivy Leaguers. President Bush was even more elite before that, and he surrounded himself. President Bush is the elite, and he surrounded himself with these people. Yes, he talked like he wasn't, but he was. And godless Democrats. It's more than just simply saying they want separation of church and state. Once you say that people, individuals have power, and everybody does, once you say that, a lot of religious leaders said, you will no longer follow God. You'll go against the teaching of God. You'll become either Catholics or even worse, pagans. They really feared. They thought it was going to be a pagan relationship. Yes, I need a pagan resurgence. Which, as you notice, have you noticed the pagan resurgence here in Helena? We have already read that quote. All their fears seem to be personified by this event. March 3rd, 1829 was Jackson's inauguration, and thousands of people came to Washington, D.C. And by the way, Washington, D.C., no one lived there. And so they just poured out of Washington, D.C. They stayed in the front yard of the Executive Mansion. Over the next decade, what will the Executive Mansion soon be called? Why?
It's white.
Yeah, it's white. They all came, and it was crazy. Back then, you could just go knock on the door and go visit the president. And so what happened is they literally opened up the White House, and thousands of people came storming through the White House. And the front foyer of the White House was, in fact, you better get this down, the #1 symbol of democracy. In fact, when people think around the world, they think of American democracy, what do they think of? What is the one thing they think of? Cheese. And there was a big block of cheese. Cheese equals democracy. Don't forget that. Right? You take away our cheese and the republic crumbles. That's why what is the most democratic state in the union? Thank you, Wisconsin. Wisconsin, because of cheese. This is actually true. They put a big block of cheese in the foyer of the White House. And also barrels of hard cider. So people were kind of going through and they were taking, or they had mugs or wooden cups and were taking and drinking hard cider with big blocks of cheese and walking around the White House and crawling it out of the windows and taking down curtains and just going crazy. Now, we got to get these people out. So how do you get people out? Yeah, people follow cheese, right? So they took the cheese out. People, cheese, they followed it. So think about it. Can you see anything more democratic? Look, hard cider, cheese. That kid. No, what happened was, as all the detractors of the democracy said, look at the mob. Look what happens when you elect a man like Andrew Jackson. As it turned out, Andrew Jackson was significantly different than what people thought. Hearing the stories about Jackson, they really thought he was this uncouth, hard man who would hang you at the drop of the hat. No, he would take a couple drops of the hat for him to hang you. Yeah, he had a terrible temper, but for the most part, Jackson was very urbane, cultured, smart, very friendly, charming, funny. He did have a bad temper. But part of the reason he had a bad temper is he had a couple bullets in him. He had all these wounds from war. His stomach was in constant pain. He could barely eat. He ate just basically milk and kind of a gruel, and of course cheese because he's a Democrat. And he drank gallons of alcohol. He drank the alcohol because he's self-medicating. He's in pain. And so you gotta understand something, that's what you did back then, choice. There were a lot of drunks because they were in pain and they drank. There were drunks as you would think a drunk would be, yeah.
So side note, when did marijuana get introduced to the U.S.?
That marijuana was already there. That's as old as there was the United States. So. Yeah.
When was it banned?
30s.
I said he was self-medicated.
Yeah, that is what it is, but yeah, self-medicated. That's actually fits. And what happened was, though, Jackson really was not what they thought. And there weren't a lot of changes at first. There's a picture of Jackson, and he really was very urbane. He wasn't what the animal people thought. But he was a fighter, and even though he had these beliefs, he didn't know how to handle them. Well, then a couple things came up. And the first thing we have to get to is called the Eaton Affair. And the Eaton Affair is also called the Eaton malaria. It's also called the Eaton malaria. And malaria as an illness kind of almost, it doesn't like eat away, but it's this constant sickness where it just drains away your energy. That's what happened. Jackson had a cross-section of people in his cabinet. But one of the problems in Washington, D.C. at that time, no one lived there. Congress was rarely in session, especially in the summer because it was so hot. So cabinet members and their families basically did everything together. And what happened was the Secretary of War, John Eaton, married a woman by the name of Peggy O'Neill. And Peggy O'Neill had been divorced and also worked in a tavern. Does that remind you of somebody? Who?
Jackson.
Yeah, and Rachel, who passed away right after the election of 1828, Jackson mourned her passing for the rest of his life. Jackson was very conscious of this. And what happened is about half of the cabinet snubbed him and his wife. Uncouth. Commoners. That's how commoners live. They snubbed him. Jackson was furious because of course he's going to sympathize. Of course. He was so mad. The elite said, how dare you act in an immoral fashion? Which, by the way, you get people doing that to this very day. How dare you do these things? Especially people who might have done it in their lifetime, too. You probably will get that a lot in your lifetime, probably already have. And so, nobody complained more than the vice president. Who's the vice president? John C. Calhoun. And who's his wife? Who's considered to be kind of the social leader amongst the members of the cabinet. That's his wife. Anyone know her name? Fluoride.
I have to pause.
Fluoride Calhoun. That's her name. Really? Fluoride. John Caldwell Calhoun and fluoride. Once again, if you have children, right, little fluoride. What happens before we get to that is that Jackson was furious, and he's already mad at Calhoun. He hates Calhoun. Everybody of goodwill hates Calhoun. But Jackson began to surround himself by people who did respect him. It was called the Kitchen Cabinet. And before I get to the cartoon, the leader of it would be this man, the wily politician from New York, a true Democrat, believing in the democracy, Martin Van Buren. Van Buren would be one of the most powerful, clever politicians of this era. Underrated as an American politician, he really is. This is an anti-Jackson cartoon showing, because of eating malaria and other issues, the rats are jumping ship. Everyone's abandoning him as the Republic collapses behind him. The Kitchen Cabinet became unofficial advisors of his who supported Jackson's democracy, not the elite. But then there will be a couple other issues that would begin to personify this divide. And the first one we have to get to is Indian removal. Now, we've already read a little about this, so I'm going to go over this pretty fast. Indian removal. First off, don't forget, Indian removal was the plan of the United States since Jefferson. But we don't know to this day what Jackson was thinking. He gave it a twofold thing. Yes, he wanted to open up that land for the farmers that by his term wanted to move in there. The southwestern tribes in Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, they weren't really pushed until Jackson became president. But also, he argued on trying to save their lives. If they remain, the United States will kill them. And that's probably true. The United States pretty much showed it before. When they wanted the land, they're going to move you. They're going to take it. And so he said, I'm going to move you. I'm going to move you to save your lives. Well, what passed Congress was the Indian Removal Act. Before you write 5 civilized tribes, write the Indian Removal Act. And what it did is, it set up this idea of an Indian territory. There would be an Indian territory west of the Mississippi. What state would Indian territory be? What state is Indian territory today? Do we know? Oklahoma. Oklahoma was Indian territory. Oklahoma. And the plan was they would move there. Now, the 5 civilized tribes would be moved if it's forced removal. Now, this is a very complex thing in the law. The law is really weird. It doesn't say that the federal government will remove them. It's if the states do forced removal, then the federal government will help move them. The states have to do the forced removal. It doesn't say that the United States is going to move people from Georgia. Georgia has to do it. The 5 civilized tribes were, because they were the most powerful tribes remaining, was now east of the Mississippi River. The Cherokee, by the way, that's one of the most famous Cherokee. Sequoia. You know what Sequoia invented? Yeah. And they wanted to prove that they deserved their land. The Creek, who Jackson defeated at Horseshoe Bend, the Choctaw, who allied with the Creek, Chickasaw, another powerful tribe, and then the Seminole. If the states remove them, the United States will help. And Jackson's opponents said they didn't support this bill. In reality, it passed almost unanimously. They would later on say it's a bad bill, but it was more just to attack Jackson for being a hypocrite, because Jackson deserves to be attacked as a hypocrite. Yeah, he said he wanted to save their lives, but he wanted to save their lives after they had been subdued. And who subdued them by killing them? Soldiers under Jackson. So there's a lot of hypocrisy going on this. Nobody's hands are clean, except for, you could argue, the Cherokee. Well, yeah.
What is it called? What is it?
Alphabet.
Oh.
Alphabet for the Cherokee. 2 Supreme Court cases will come out of this, and these are 2 really important court cases because they still have precedent today. The first one, Cherokee Nation versus Georgia, said the Cherokee Nation are independent. Well, not independent. They gave them a special title. They are a domestic dependent nation because they signed a treaty with the United States. They are a domestic dependent treaty. So Georgia can't do whatever they want. Therefore, it kind of invalidates this law. Domestic because, yes, they live within the borders of the United States. They're dependent because they are in the United States. But they are a nation because they signed a treaty. Today, every reservation operates under that concept. They are a domestic dependent nation to this day. So they are not quite under state rule. There's a very complex relationship after the second court case. The second court case. Worcester versus Georgia. Worcester versus Georgia. Indians are sovereign. Sovereign means powerful. Their laws apply. Now you look at that, okay, whatever that means, Georgia can't move them. Georgia can't. That say that, for example, people can't go in the Cherokee Nation without doing a loyalty oath. These 2 court cases apply to reservations today. That is why today, on the 7 reservations in Montana, have you noticed that some state laws don't apply? And there are things in reservations that things that are legal in reservations or illegal in reservations, different than what's legal or illegal in Montana. Anyone have an example?
Fireworks.
See, I knew that somebody would say it. Thank you. You're not. Every class, someone always says it's fireworks. There are different fireworks available on reservations and at different times of year. If you like fireworks, like blowing things up, yeah, you can go buy fireworks. For there's state restrictions on when they can sell. You can't sell fireworks right now in the state. But in some reservations, they can year-round.
So,
Hmm?
and what you can sell.
Yeah, they have some pretty nasty ones up there.
They don't have restrictions on what they put in.
Well, there are restrictions, but the tribes decided. So some reservations have different restrictions. Do they sell Roman candles?
Yeah.
Woo! Okay, when I was a kid, we used to do Roman candle wars.
Bottle rocket wars.
Don't do that. That's how you lose eyes. You know what a Roman candle is? You don't hold them, but we did. Yeah, it's stupid. They fire out like little balls of fire. It's supposed to be like different colors to be like fireworks, and we would shoot them at each other.
We did that.
Now remember, I'm a lot older,
We tried to play baseball.
and I know people. I mean, people get hit in the face, got burned, scarred. So, yeah, we did bottle rock, yeah, and the M80s, crazy stuff. But there's other things about drinking. Other laws don't apply. For example, Highway 93 that goes from Missoula up to Kalispell is one of the most dangerous highways in Montana. for lots of reasons. And the Flathead Reservation refuses to make it a 4-lane because we're not going to do it and we don't care. If any road should be a 4-lane road, it's that one because it's really busy, but they won't do it because we're a domestic dependent nation. But when Jackson got this, what did he do? When Georgia said, you got to move, what did Jackson do? Jackson said, fine, nice laws. It only applies to federal laws, not states. Not going to enforce them. When I was young, I was always told Jackson said this. He probably did not say this. John Marshall has made a decision. I'll let him enforce it. You have to come talk to me about that, I said, okay? He probably did not say this, but that's essentially the essence of it. What Jackson is saying here is that Marshall's decision in the Supreme Court doesn't apply to the states. And actually, most people agreed with him then. Supreme Courts would not apply to the state fully, even though Fletcher versus Peck was signed, but people did not accept that until 1867.
So these two court cases decide things like that. The state can make whatever law they want.
Well, these said the states couldn't.
Right.
But what Jackson said was, fine, but they're in the states, so the states make their own decisions.
So those were like federal.
Yeah, that's federal, but now these are the law of the land, these two.
But isn't it, so then the federal government can't help them though?
No, federal government can't,
Why can it help them? Doesn't that violate court cases?
because they're still domestically dependent on the federal government. It's a really weird relationship.
No, but when Jackson said.
Oh, what Jackson said is, no, because this is happening on things that have already been decided as, they're already states.
But doesn't.
It's no longer federal territory.
Doesn't the state have to physically move them though, and the federal government can't?
Yeah, and then, so what Jackson said is, okay, the states want to move them, then that we step in.
Oh, okay.
And so what happened was Indian removal. By the way, here is the Cherokee language. Here is Jackson as the protector of the Indians, obviously a pro-Jackson cartoon. And here's an anti-Jackson cartoon. That's Jackson leading the tribes out. And it's a, like the democratic idea of all men have rights. Yeah, right. That's what the tractor said. And who's that? The devil.
Playing a fiddle.
Right down the Trail of Tears. The Trail of Tears would be the most infamous example of this, and this was the Cherokee. A third would die on the way. The Cherokee resisted totally the Van Buren's presidency, but when they were finally moved, a third died of the Cherokee. The United States government did nothing that they promised to do. They did not have food supplies or support for them. They moved in the winter, which made it much worse. It wasn't that they planned to kill a third, but it was criminal negligence. So it also detracts from this whole thing about saving lives. Now, we have the test that we moved till Friday. Is everyone okay with that, or do you want it tomorrow?
No, Friday.
You want it Friday?
Yeah.
You want it tomorrow? Okay, I only got a couple minutes. You want to hear the good dueling story?
Yes.
So Jackson did fight over 100 duels. The most famous was either over Jackson accusing a guy named Robert Livingston for cheating on a horse race. It might have something to do with a slave girl, and I think you understand how horrible slavery was, so it might have something to do with that. We don't know for sure, but Jackson accused Livingston of cheating. Livingston, of course, could not tolerate this and accepted, challenged Jackson to a duel. The duel would be fought with pistols, but this was in Nashville. And unlike Hamilton and Burr, they had a little formula to make sure no one got in trouble, this was right out on Main Street in Nashville. Hundreds came out to watch the duel. Livingston was a crack shot, but Jackson was a frightening man. You did not want to mess with Jackson. They stood 20 paces apart. Now, Jackson always let the other man fire first. Livingston, a crack shot, said, I'll take care of it right now. Livingston was spirited. He didn't shoot in the ground. He aimed right at Jackson, aimed right at him, and fired. Jackson, who had a cloak on, but it was tied down, tied across, was hit right here, right on his right side, right here. Went through, cracked, broke at least 5 ribs, collapsed a lung, which, by the way, as I understand, I've never done it. Collapsing your lung is the most painful thing imaginable. When you take that first breath, I've broken a rib, and that hurt like,
You can have collapse.
huh?
You can have collapse.
Then it's not a full collapse one. Hit there. No, it's true. You can't have a collapse run and not know. But it went through and hit. The bullet ended up lodging a quarter inch from his heart. Jackson, wearing the cloak, shook. Blood is pooling around here, and then pooling around his feet. He just stared at him, and then took his pistol and aimed. I always wondered what Livingston was thinking at that moment. Jackson took careful aim and bang! Right there. Livingston died. Boom, gone. Then Jackson, people came out to rush him and he shook him away. And he walked to a doctor. And he said, even if he would have killed me, I would have hit him in the head. Jackson is the toughest man ever to live.
You want me to take the?
Yeah, let's do it real quick. It'll take 5 minutes.
Yeah, sure.
So this is.
The test will be Friday.
Yeah.
Whatever. That means you're just gonna do more for Christmas break. I make it up for you late. I really do. Personnel, wait a minute, you guys have to.
You don't like it real. Mr. Barger.
I'll give you a few points, okay? Not again, get it in.
See.
Half sheet of paper? I think someone else is coming. I'm just gonna put it on the overhead.
Okay.
What do I have for lunch?
Do you mind if I use a full sheet?
No, it's fine.